Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we have a special guest joining us, Assemblymember Luz Rivas, joining us from Assembly District 39. Luz, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, I was looking through your background. My producers gave me your background, and I see that you're an engineer that went to MIT and Harvard, and now you're here as an Assembly member. Can you kind of tell us of your journey of engineering to Assembly?
Sure. I'll start off from when I was a kid, right? So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Pacoima, which is in the Assembly District that I represent. And when I was in elementary school, my fifth grade teacher taught us how to program a computer. And this is 1984, right? So none of us had cell phones. We didn't have laptops and computers at home.
Like those big floppy disks.
The computer didn't even have a mouse, right? So I learned to program. There was a green cursor on the screen and I got very excited. I thought it was just a game, like a fun thing, classroom activity, right? And then, I got very good at it and my teacher was like, you should consider a career in computer science. I was like, what? People get paid to do this? I had no idea. No one in my family went to college. I had a cousin that went to college years before, but my parents, they're immigrants from Mexico and, they didn't go to college. We didn't know any scientists and engineers. Most people in my community are, work at factories, they're seamstresses, gardeners. So just working class community. Right. So no access to, family friends that are engineers. But that experience led me to go through middle school and high school interested in engineering. And then when I got to high school, one of my math teachers told me, you should apply to MIT. And I was a junior in high school. I had no idea what that was. She told me it was a university that was well known for engineering. And she thought that would be a great fit for me. So I ended up applying and I got in. So it was I kind of just stumbled into all of this, but that's really how this happened. And then, after MIT, my first job was in Chicago. I worked for Motorola. I worked in automotive electronics. So I designed the electronics for navigation systems that are now in cars. Back then in the mid to late 90s, not very many people had GPS in their cars. So It was all brand new. Exciting technology, which was a lot of fun to be part of a team that was working on something so innovative. But then, after I finished that project, I just thought a lot of kids like me don't know about careers in STEM. The place I worked at, the engineers, it wasn't very diverse, right? I was probably the only Latina engineer, or one of very few in the whole company. Out of hundreds of engineers. And it just got me thinking, how did I get here? And how do we get more kids like me to choose careers like this? And that's when I kind of made a turn into STEM education, ended up going back to grad school to study, focusing on technology and education at Harvard. And then eventually came home and I started a nonprofit called DIY Girls, that empowers young girls and teaches them about STEM and future careers that may be exciting. The organization still exists. It's going strong. It's in my district, which I totally love. But while I was leading that nonprofit, I got to know my congressman. I met my congressman at an event. I already knew, others that were elected. Some of them I went to high school with, like, Alex Padilla. Our U.S. Senator. I went to high school and college with him. And I knew some of the city council members. So when there was an opening for this district, which my predecessor resigned, they thought of me as a potential candidate because I was very active in my community as a nonprofit leader. I had an engineering background and I was appointed by Mayor Garcetti to the City of LA Board of Public Works. So was already at City Hall working on engineering for the city. And when I got a call late at night from one of the electeds in my area, I thought they were crazy. Like, what? I'm not going to run for assembly.
Right.
You're crazy. But that conversation led into many more, and other community members calling me and asking me to run. And so I had a very short time because it was a special election. So just decided to run for the assembly after that. And it all worked out.
And what year was that? Was that 2018?
2018, early 2018. So the primary that year was April of 2018. And so I decided to run in January of 2018.
Okay, can you kind of describe, I guess, kind of what was like the culture shock when you went to MIT, having never been there, never been to the East Coast, coming from LA, kind of what was that experience like?
Like I said, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. Never really left California. We didn't travel. I grew up with a single mother. We didn't have very much money, so we didn't go on any vacations. I mean, we went to Disneyland every summer, but that's Anaheim, just an hour or so away. And so I felt like I was in another country when I went to Boston, especially because, there's a lot of historical, even the architecture and just the way everything looks. It just felt like I was in Europe almost. And also just being a very competitive university, right? I went to LA public schools, I did very well. But, I was there with kids that are the best in their countries or in the top high schools in the United States. So it was intimidating. I had a great support network. But, there was the culture shock of like, wow, I'm at a, elite university and I come from LA. Should I really be here?
And it's cold.
And the weather, that was the first time I saw snow. I remember that winter, I went outside and was like running around, and I had never seen snow fall from the sky, ever. And, even in LA, I never went skiing and never went up to the mountains to the snows. I had never touched snow. But then it was fun at first, but then when those winters just seem like they're never ending, like, okay, enough. It's too cold here.
You were glad to come home. You mentioned that, Alex Padilla, was in high school with you as well. Was he a few years older than you in
He's
school?
1 year older than me. So he ended up at MIT. And then when I applied, he definitely called me and was trying to recruit me. I didn't want to leave home. I thought, Los Angeles has great universities and I could go to UCLA, USC.
Caltech.
Yeah, Caltech. I didn't apply to Caltech, but, there's plenty of universities in LA. And I'm like, why would I ever leave? And so he definitely was instrumental in convincing me to go to MIT. Because even when I got in, I'm like, well, I'm not going. It's too far. It's across the country. It's a 5-hour plane ride from LA. Even Mexico, where my family is from, is closer. And I think when I told my mom that, she kind of freaked out. Like, she's like, where are you going? And so it was helpful to have him there. He had already been there for a year. He knew the ropes, what classes to take, how to get help. I met a lot of people through him. So he was kind of like my MIT big brother.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool story. What I find so fascinating is, there's 80 assembly members and everyone has such a different background. Your background in engineering is definitely unique for the assembly. Kind of, how are you utilizing your background and your experiences kind of, moving forward and helping, craft policy and kind of the committees you're on?
I think having an engineering background, as an engineer, a lot of things are about process and, making things better or designing something to be robust, and I think I bring that to a lot of things that I do and the way I think. And so now, I was recently appointed to become the chair of natural resources, the Assembly Natural Resources Committee, which I love so far, and, just for a few months, the way I think of things and, I think of technologies, science, and, I think it helps in the policy issue areas that are part of that committee.
Right. Obviously technology, California has been, the center of a lot of technology and innovation. But, the state has always kind of lagged behind, especially the agencies in technology. We just recently had the DMV a couple years ago. Now we have the EDD. Have you dug into kind of your knowledge about technology and kind of maybe how the state and the agencies can kind of update things and kind of help themselves a little better?
Yes, think, you know, I think the main issue is that, our state is still running a lot of these systems, they're legacy systems, right? They are run on like what's called COBOL, which is a
Right.
very old computer language that was developed, probably 50s or 60s, right? And it was meant for business applications at the time, but it's very hard to update, especially today, and for it to integrate with other systems. And so it, when we talk to the EDD teams, as a caucus, we've had several calls with them, especially because, there's been, so many issues with EDD. And a lot of it, they say, well, our computer system can't do that or can't handle that. And it's very frustrating that we've allowed this as a state. Like you said, California is very innovative, known for, its breakthroughs in technology. But, something that's very important to our constituents is running on 1960s technology.
Right.
And, a lot of what we get, like, it's too expensive to update, right? And does anybody want to take that on, right? And for a lot of us that are here, we think of, okay, what are we going to be remembered for? Or how can I, what do my constituents care about, right? And so is that going to be our number one ask? But we have, a lot of my colleagues, especially those that are on budget sub 4, that oversee EDD, have really come together to try to come up with a solution.
No, that's great and much needed. As you kind of mentioned, is right now we're in the midst of budget season. You guys just came to a budget agreement. Can you kind of talk to us about your thoughts on the budget and kind of some things that you were able to get for your district?
First, we came out of COVID recently, or we're in that process, about maybe 6 months ago or so. We thought we would be cutting programs.
Right.
We didn't expect the revenue that we have today, and it's very exciting. First, I want to commend our budget chairs, Phil Ting and Nancy Skinner, for working with all of us on this state budget. For me, I've been pushing for funding for homelessness. I had a bill this year, AB 71, that I was working on with a big coalition of housing advocates. We didn't put that on the floor, but we've been working with the budget chairs and the sub chairs to include some of the language of the bill as part of a budget trailer bill. So ongoing funding for homelessness has been one of my priorities, to help local governments. This is the number one issue in California, in my district, in Los Angeles, statewide. And so we have been working to get that language in. Another priority for me this year was universal school meals. I had a bill that would have made reduced price lunch free. So instead of charging kids 40 cents for lunch, and these are kids that are already from low income households, why are we charging them money and putting these kids into debt, right? That's what I thought. Kids should be able to have at least one meal at school free, all kids. And I know Senator Nancy Skinner, that was her big bill this year, and we were working together. And, I'm hoping that makes it in to the final budget, that we are able to provide school meals for all kids.
Yeah, no, definitely worthy. And that's something kind of the pandemic brought up that was kind of eye-opening to me, is when all the schools shut down, that one meal a day was so important to a lot of the students who couldn't get it once the school closed. So
yeah, and think about the families where suddenly that increases their budget, right? They relied on their kid eating lunch at school, and now because of the pandemic, they had to provide the food.
Yeah, it was tough on me as the parent who does cook. Going from 1 or 2 meals a day to three was definitely an increase in grocery shopping
Oh
and
yeah,
cooking output.
parents.
So
Yeah, I commend all the parents that were home with their kids during the pandemic. I'm sure it was very difficult.
yeah. So a couple weeks ago, the leadership came to an announcement that each member got 12 bills. So can you kind of talk to us about kind of the bills you're running this year and kind of who made the final 12 and kind of how your bill package is looking?
Oh yeah, so I have exactly 12. At the end of our appropes, I had 16 bills. So I did have to either hold some, or what I did, because we had two new members, I was able to give a bill to, Assemblymember Akila Weber and another one
Oh, nice.
to Assemblymember Isaac Bryan. And so those bills are continuing on. But this year, the package that I have in my 12 are bills that deal with issues such as homelessness. I have a bill that removes the term alien from state laws when referring to non-citizens. We still use alien in our code. Of course, I'm working on climate change. So an area that I'm passionate about is extreme heat, and how do we mitigate those heat in our communities, especially this week, which is very timely.
Right.
I have a bill that deals with school nurses and the shortage of school nurses, and how important that is for children to have someone that can provide, some type of health care at school. I grew up with a school nurse, and today not every school has one. And a lot of it is these barriers that exist for people that want to become school nurses. And then I have one that's more of a district bill. It's on equestrian rider safety. So part of my district is probably one of the last affordable areas in Los Angeles that you can own a horse. And there's, part of it is even zoned for horses. They have stables in their backyard. And this community is very active. And, we had a town hall and they came up with a bill idea, and so that's one of my bills. So I think in a nutshell, those are my
So
bills.
the equestrian bill, what committees is it going through? Is it local government? Is it
Oh, transportation.
transportation? Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
so far. Yeah. So all it does is it requires minors that are riding the horse on paved highways to wear a helmet. So anyone
Uh,
under 18, there's been a lot of accidents in my area because, they're sharing the road with cars, and unfortunately there's been some injuries, or they had to euthanize the horses.
oh wow.
And so, and also requiring either the rider or the horse to have some type of reflective gear when they're riding in the evening or
Mhm.
at night.
Yeah, no common sense measure for sure. One thing you mentioned was your bill. What I believe it's AB 1096, replacing the word alien in California law. Can you kind of give us a little more background on that and kind of, I guess what are we replacing the word with, and kind of where are the roots of kind of using alien for kind of immigrant?
Yeah, so we have looked into it, and I don't remember the year when California started using the word alien. Maybe late 1800s, the federal government started referring to immigrants as aliens,
Mhm.
right? And I think since then, this word has been weaponized and used in place of like a racial slur. My family are immigrants. There are a lot of immigrants from all over the world. Why do we call them aliens? If it, I think it feels like you don't belong here. That's what I hear when I
Right.
hear that word. Even I remember my mom became a permanent resident in the 80s, and she got her what we call a green card, and it said resident alien, or that she had an alien registration number, and she was already here legally, and they still called her an alien, right? And so I think it's time to update that in our state laws. I got the idea. I was reading about the Biden administration's plan to replace the word alien with non-citizen, right? And I'm like, wait. So I looked up our code that night, and I found so many instances where we use alien.
Okay, interesting. And I guess to follow up on one more bill that's kind of relevant right now is AB 585, your Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program. I know locally here we're struggling with homeless people and not having anywhere to go where it's so hot, and kind of talking about cooling centers. Kind of what are some of your thoughts about this bill and kind of what you're trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I think it's time for our state to coordinate and help, urban and rural communities with extreme heat. It used to be just a few days a year, but now the season is getting longer, right? Because of climate change, right? We're experiencing heat. And like, for example, in the San Fernando Valley, where I'm from, last year in August, when we had, a few days of extreme heat, the highest recorded temperature ever in that area was 121 degrees. And like you said, we have, unfortunately, people that are experiencing homelessness. And so what would happen with this bill, it would create a competitive grant process where local governments could use these funds to reduce extreme heat. Like they could create community resilience centers, right? They could, use it for planting more trees, urban forestry. There's been new technologies like cool roofs and cool streets, cool pavements. And then just to create a plan and communications, focus on communications in their communities. We do have extreme heat.
Yeah. Kind of early in the show, you mentioned that you were the chairwoman of natural resources. Can you kind of tell us kind of what are some of the big projects you guys are working on this year in Natural Resources Committee?
Sure. So many interesting ones that went through, the assembly. And, I have several colleagues that have worked on these issues for years. And I felt my role as chair was to support them and to work with them on the policy to make sure that whatever's getting out of natural resources is the best policy that we can, create together. This year we had bills, of course, on reducing single-use plastics. We had several bills on that. We had air quality. Sea level rise is a big issue in the coastal communities, and a lot of our members that are from those areas, really care about that. What else were there? I'm trying to think of other big areas. Of course, just anything related to climate change.
Exactly. Fire, water shortages.
Oh, wildfires. Oh, wildfire resiliency. That's forestry. That's a big issue. I think that policy area had the most bills in the assembly. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear them all because we did have constraints due to COVID and, meeting rooms and hearing time. But because the committee got over 100 bills referred to it.
Yeah. So much has been kind of constrained and limited due to COVID-19. Yesterday was the magical day, June 15th, where, we were given our independence on some things for a bit. With kind of recess coming up and things opening up, are there some things you're looking forward to doing this summer that maybe you haven't done here in the recent year and a half?
I've been like, I want to go out. Go out to restaurants. Go back to support small businesses, that have been closed. Of course, I want to travel more. I haven't been able to do that much, and I do a lot of that. Even locally, it'll just be, even just getting together with friends at a house party. There's a lot of people I haven't seen in over a year because of COVID. And so just looking forward to just the basic everyday things that we took for granted before.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're all looking forward to that. Well, Assemblywoman, I know your time is short, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I just want to thank you for inviting me and for getting to know more about me, and thank you for doing this for the Sacramento community.
No, thank you so much for taking the time, and it was great to get to know you and hear what you're working on. And we look forward to kind of connecting again later in the session to see, how you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good talk with you.